straight. So you were watching Modern Marvels.
Yeah.
When the idea to bring foam insulated panels to AAON was born.
Yeah.
Wow. Ideas can really come from anywhere.
AAON was built on bold ideas and fearless innovation. We're giving you the inside look at the stories of the people shaping the future of HVAC. This is Inside AAON.
Welcome to Inside AAON. I'm Jeremy Cavness. This is Whitney Tapp.
Hey.
And welcome to season 2.
Yeah.
We've got a great set of episodes in store for our audience this season. So Whitney, why don't you give us an idea of what that looks like and what we're going to talk about today?
Okay, so for today's topic, the 5 things are going to be starting a revolution, a major differentiator, performance, customization, and why do we care?
That's right. And all of that is relative to cabinet construction. Yeah. So in order for us to dissect this, we are bringing in Kevin Teakell, head of government and industry affairs, not a new face. Everybody who's watching knows Kevin Teakell. Also recently received AAON's highest individual honor as AAON Fellow. So congratulations for that. Thank you for being here to enlighten us. So Kevin, starting a revolution. The history behind the AAON cabinet. How did we get where we are today?
So great. And thanks for having me again today, guys. And let's talk about cabinets. So it's the history goes back about 2 decades, I guess. So at the time, I was, and most of my career, I had led engineering for our applied products. So the big stuff. So like the RZ we know today and other things. But at the time, we had developed the RL product, which was the predecessor to the RZ. So I developed the RL product. We launched it in about 2001, 2002. And that product was kind of similar to its predecessor, which was known as the RF. And those products were all double wall construction products, okay? So they were 2-inch double wall with fiberglass insulation on them. And those are very large products, kind of very customizable products, of course. And those products tend to see some high static pressures on them, so high internal static pressure. So to make that product work, to make the cabinet work in that, you had to have a lot of small panels, okay? So you needed narrow panels because the panel itself, like in the middle of a fiberglass panel, there's no strength to it, okay? The fiberglass doesn't give you any strength. You only get strength from the edges of the panel where they're kind of perpendicular to the airstream. So you kind of had to have narrow panels. A lot of them were 12 inches or 18 inches wide. So we had a lot of panels on a RL unit. So for manufacturing, it's kind of a pain because you got a lot of panels to install, and then you've got a seal between each panel. So there's a lot of sealing going on and those kinds of things. So one night I was at home and I was watching, the History Channel, which, kind of a geek. I watch History Channel, and I was watching that show, Modern Marvels. I don't know if you ever saw that show.
Oh, yeah, I love that show.
So
I do watch it.
I was watching that show, and they were doing an episode on building RVs, big motorhomes. Yeah. And their construction technique, which is not exactly what we did, but their construction technique was they would build an entire wall. So they would take the entire wall skin and the outer and inner skin and do foam inside of it. And it got me thinking. I was like, you know what? That could really solve a lot of problems because we have so many panels. It's a lot of work to put them all together. And that could really solve we could go to bigger panels because now the strength is not in the side of the panel. The strength is the whole panel itself. So I got looking into that, and then I saw some stuff about, how refrigerators are made and how, they're basically, they take a refrigerator and they expand foam in it. And, refrigerators, of course, is, kind of what we're trying to do. So I asked one of our manufacturing engineers at the time to maybe go investigate. How could we do this? And he found a company down in Houston that was making these foam panels. So we went down to their facility down in Houston and learned more about it. And then we brought Norm down because we were like, this is something that could really change the way we do things. First off, it was change the way we build a unit, make it a lot easier to build and more reliable and all that. But then we were also like, hey, there's a tremendous advantage here to the insulation properties and the leakage and all these other things. So we brought Norm down and we go through it and we talk about how much it's going to cost. It's going to cost more and all these things. But he was totally blown away with the idea, and right there we signed a contract and we just took off and went going with it. So
let me get this straight. So You were watching Modern Marvels.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. That it came from this.
When the idea to bring foam insulated panels to AAON was born.
Yeah.
Wow.
That
So
I had
and-
never heard
you
that.
know,
yeah, ideas can really come from anywhere.
at the time, at least I'm not aware of anyone else in our industry doing that kind of thing.
Right.
The RL was always a product that was a double wall cabinet, so it was a no-brainer there, okay, to do that because it's it doesn't take any more material, it can save a lot of effort and all those things. And then a couple years later, we're looking at the old RN product, which is the predecessor to the RN we have today, our mainstay product. And it was a single wall cabinet, much of like what you see in the rest of the industry, single wall with, half-inch fiberglass insulation glued inside. And we started thinking, should we do that to the bread and butter products as well? And that's a big decision because that's a lot more expensive cabinet to build than what we were building at the time, what the rest of the industry still kind of builds today. And we determined, hey, this is the right thing. This is the right thing to do. We're going to do that. And then as we progressed in the way we were doing things, we realized, wait a minute, we can it's more material, some more cost involved, but there's some things we can do to maybe save some of the cost and effort that goes into manufacturing too.
You guys are having to make a business decision also along the way to say we need to charge more for our products, but at the same time they're going to provide our customers with more value, and then we can reach for our goals long term as well if we have a better, durable, more efficient cabinet.
Which leads directly into our second point, being a major differentiator in the market.
So, topic number 2. Let's talk specifically about the differentiators. Be specific here. What are the things about our cabinet that, at least at the time of inception, were different, but now still today remain leading differentiators for AAON?
Most competitors that are making this type of equipment are building single wall with fiberglass that's glued onto the inside of the cabinet. Okay. There's issues with that fiberglass. Okay, fiberglass can get into the airstream. Some places like hospitals, they don't want fiberglass floating around. It's a porous material, so and this can be a pretty damp environment, especially downstream of the indoor coil, the evaporator. It can be damp in there. You can over time you can build up mold and other things in that. So there's certainly issues with it. The other thing that happens over time is that fiberglass can maybe kind of break down a bit. The glues break down.
Right. And we see that, right? We see that we have units, competitor units on our floor. We see this insulation fall apart.
You can open doors and it kind of falls out. To me, that's really the big differentiator is we're really trying to make sure that all those BTUs and all those watts that you pay for are being conditioned in the unit and going back into the space instead of being lost to the outdoors.
Yeah.
And you would say, would you agree, building owners, people who are investing in these products and all of this engineering, they probably don't know the majority of what you just said in terms of just like insulation and lack of efficiency upstream and downstream. Right. It's not just the insulation itself and the 1-to-1 R value of the insulation. It's the things that are happening around the unit, creating efficiencies or inefficiencies downstream that are hurting the owner.
Most building owners, they're concerned about their building and their tenants and the people inside and making sure they're happy and all that. And they're not necessarily, most building owners probably don't go on the roof and look at their air conditioner and see what they bought. Most purchasing people, when they're buying it, they're looking at the piece of paper that says this unit does this and this unit does this and this one costs this and this. They're comparing things on a piece of paper and not actually looking at them. And that's really where you see the big differences when you come see the difference with your own eyes, what the difference between those cabinets are. That's great.
So speaking of efficiency, that brings us to our next point, performance. So how does this cabinet affect the performance?
So, again, the unit is sitting outside on a roof. Okay, so which is, can be very hot, can be very cold, right?
A lot of elements.
And when you think about load or capacity, it's really a function of the differential temperatures. When we think about capacity of the unit, it's the airflow times the difference in temperatures, from the inlet to the outlet. Okay, well, we can kind of think of the same thing in the cabinet. So, for instance, it could be, if it's 95, 100 degrees on the roof, we may be 55 degrees inside the cabinet. So, that difference, which is, maybe 40, 50 degrees, can really drive a lot of losses through that cabinet. Okay, and again, we want to contain all that work we did with the compressor to get it to our space. So unfortunately, those losses are going to go out through the cabinet. It's even worse when you think about heating. Okay, heating, maybe it's 0 degrees outside, and we're trying to heat to maybe 95 or 100. So now you've got like a 90-degree delta across that cabinet. That's a tremendous amount of loss that you can have in your cabinet.
That's just money flying out.
Just money just going straight
money out the door.
Going straight through the wall of the cabinet, right? When you're actually operating a unit, it depends where you are. You know, if you're in a really cold climate where you've got a lot of cold hours, it can make a really big difference.
I guess when we look at the performance differences between a quality cabinet and a crap cabinet, you know, why do other manufacturers continue to go down this road? I realize that some competitors are price first, right? And not every customer out there can afford or is interested in the most expensive product. But as it relates to just doing the right thing and efficiencies and doing the right thing for the building owner who is buying this product, why are other manufacturers still producing cabinets that are so inefficient and so poorly made?
Just like most things in all economies things, right? It's really supply and demand. So a lot of customers are still okay with that cabinet. And it's really probably because they just don't understand it, right? So that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that it's not just the physical making of that actual individual product day to day. It's all the R&D that goes into it. There's a lot you have to learn from in the foam making process as well. When we first started it, we weren't very good at it. There's quite a learning curve to it. So it's a difficult process, but we've learned over the last 2 decades how to do this really well.
So where does the thermal break come in? Because you hear that all the time, like when we're promoting our cabinets, and a lot of people don't know what a thermal break is.
I don't know what a thermal break is. I'm just going to be honest.
I didn't want to call you out specifically, but I had a feeling.
So the thermal break's important because when you're making a panel, okay, you've kind of got your main panel, and then you bend the flanges back into the unit, right, to give you strength for the cabinet. So those flanges, it's a piece of metal that's going from the inside of the cabinet to the outside of the cabinet. Okay, metal is very conductive, right? We use metal pans to cook with, right, because it transfers the heat from the burner to our food, right? So metal is very conductive. So that metal, metal flange going from the inside of the cabinet to the outside will transfer heat very easily. So what you do is you want to break that up, okay? You don't want to have a solid piece of metal that goes from the inside of the cabinet to the outside. So what we do is instead of one metal flange that goes all the way through, we do a flange from both the inner panel and the outer panel, and then we put it's basically kind of like a neoprene gasket or something in between those flanges so that the heat cannot conduct from the inside of the panel to the outside of the panel.
So you prevent the transfer of heat through the metal panel.
So if you take, if you go up on a roof and you take a thermal imaging camera and take a picture of our unit next to another unit, you'll see the temperature differences. They'll pop right out at you.
Let's talk a little bit about customization as a point of emphasis here. So AAON offers a few ways to customize the cabinet. A lot of people don't know that we have customization.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know we have the special paint.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something we do a lot of marketing around, but I thought it would be interesting to talk about a couple of elements that make our cabinets unique and fun and different.
Yeah, so let's talk about paint for a moment. So that paint really protects the unit well. So especially if you live within a couple of miles of a coast, okay, you'll see equipment that maybe lasts 10, 15 years in the rest of the country, may last a year or two even on the coast in coastal environments because of all the corrosion. Well, this paint that we use really protects the unit, and you get a lot longer life out of the equipment when you're on a coast. We even do things where we'll paint the inside of the unit as well if you want. Then since we are doing paint after we've built the unit, we're not pre-painting it, we can paint that unit any color you want. Okay, we paint all kinds of colors.
Yeah, I've seen some fun ones.
Yeah.
I remember at one point we did one of the buildings in downtown Tulsa, and they wanted these were indoor units, and they wanted specific colors. They wanted the air conditioning units, the air handlers, to be Valentine red, and then the energy recovery units were this canary yellow.
I remember the yellow ones.
We do a lot of that custom color stuff too that you can't do when you're doing a pre-paint.
That's cool. So let's boil all of this down. So we've talked about the inception of the cabinet, crazy story. We've talked about the differentiators. We've talked about the performance and then the customization. So at the end of the day, why do people care? Why should anybody care about what we just talked about? How does this add up for the rep that's selling the equipment? How does this make sense for the customer who's buying the equipment? Just boil this down for me, and then we'll get out of here.
So I think maybe it helps if we.
Oh, here we go.
If we do a little
prop time.
if we do a little prop.
I was wondering if you were going to have a prop today.
Maybe it helps if we do a little prop. Okay. So here's 2 cups, right? We use cups to drink some sort of liquid, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's cold.
Yeah. If the job is to hold the liquid,
if it's to hold the liquid,
fine,
this holds the liquid.
It's going to hold the liquid.
Right. Now, it's not going to necessarily keep your drink cold very long.
Right.
Or if this was hot, this was coffee, you'd be burning your hand maybe, even just holding it.
It's kind of
right?
gross to think about drinking coffee out of that.
Yeah, right. You'd be burning your hand or hot tea or whatever, right? But then you have your vacuum insulated mug, right? These are becoming extremely common, right? The stainless steel vacuum mug. These are highly insulated, right? This is an AAON one. This was made by Gator, but people think about Yetis or whatever. That's kind of become the trade name or whatever. This, you can keep, your drink hot for a day sometimes, or cold for a day. You can, sometimes I'll take one to work with ice in it, and I'll bring it home, and the next morning it's still got ice in it, right? So it's a totally different experience, right? That's kind of what we're talking about here. It's, the difference between what everyone else does and what AAON does, right? So it's about the longevity of the cabinet. It's about putting our BTUs where we want them, what we paid for where we wanted it, right? Not leaking it out to the world. It's all those things really that come together to make that really quality product.
Yeah, that's good. And it's not always as easy as just saying, hey, the cabinet, AAON's cabinet is superior in the industry, because that's a given. We know that. Come to our factory, do a visit, come to the Customer Exploration Center, see firsthand, side by side, the cabinet. There's no comparison. Yeah. However, for those who are still interested in just holding liquid, there is an option out there for them, right? We know that this is economics. There are some situations that don't require the level of quality that AAON offers. But in case you do, AAON is here. We've got the best cabinet in the industry. We're going to maintain that, always stay ahead. That's kind of what we do here. So this has been a really good conversation. I really appreciate your time coming here. Whitney, thanks again for being here. Appreciate the listeners for tuning in. And then we will catch you guys on another episode.
Yeah.
Peace.
See ya.
Yep.